Today, I would like to talk about the creative process, how one thing creatively as artists can lead to another, and then talk about one piece in particular where this happened for me. First, I will give you a quick shot of my lower level exhibition space, and then talk about the piece in particular and how that happened. A quick view of the lower level converted gallery space I made in my house. And yes, I have had people come over and take a look at it. I recommend doing it. So the piece I would like to mention, I think I've shown before somewhere. It's somewhat atypical of what I do. However, to me, it's very comfortable and something that I have been doing for a while. But this is a 4 by 5 foot piece in oil titled Ballad of the Crow. It is of a milk shed concrete barn structure in Ontario. And to me, it is not a big departure from some of my other work, given that the shapes involved to me are very abstract, and it could almost go entirely abstract, just working with these different shapes. But the idea of this came about wanting to paint the structure. I've done it before. I finished the piece and had not added the snow effect or this shadow of a crow image that I will get to. Anyway, I had finished the piece, and it is realism, but it sort of was just flat for me and uninteresting. I thought, I've done it before. What else can I do with it to sort of like push it and turn it into something else that doesn't just feel repetitive? So I thought about, well, I haven't done it before, showing it in wintertime. So I did a wash over top of the finished piece and then did the stippling effect for snow, sort of in different sizes, and maybe a little pigment added in just to sort of give it some depth, often like wildlife artists will do. And one of my favorite of all time, Robert Bateman, who happens to be Canadian and was an influence in me becoming a painter actually as a teenager. So moving on, I added the snow, and it definitely added some interest to the piece, but there was still something missing. And I thought, well, who sees this as it exists in nature? Often, maybe someone will walk by, but then I thought about animals, and I thought about the Canadian winter and what is often seen in the wintertime in North America, but a crow. So I thought, well, maybe I'll paint a crow in, but then that seemed almost too cliche to me, even though it might have worked, and it probably would. But then I thought about, well, what about a shadow of a crow? Give it a little bit of mystique and maybe folklore or something. I know in some indigenous populations, the crow has some spiritual history. So what I did is look at some different shapes of crows, found one that I liked, drew it to scale, cut it out as a stencil, and sort of held a light in back of it and moved it around the piece until I found a place I thought would be interesting. and that being, what would the shadow of the bird actually look like if it were flying next to this stone concrete structure in real life. And this piece, by the way, is pretty much 1-to-1 scale. So I moved it around a little bit on the canvas and decided on the upper right-hand corner, and sort of just did a, 1 or 2 layer wash, sort of creating the shadow of what a crow would look like if it were flying past the building. After I'd done that, I thought, okay, that's it. It really doesn't need any more. I like the scale of it, the aesthetics of it. It was starting to tell a story. So after this piece was finished, and I spent some time with it, I started to think of a title. What would it be? Canadian Winter. Long story short, I sort of settled on Ballad of the Crow. And how that came about was that I thought about the life of this crow and it flying freely across Ontario. And I don't know the range of crows, but perhaps other provinces. And so here's where the sort of leap in creativity came in. The crow suddenly became a metaphor for someone wanting to visit their lover, think about their lover many provinces away. And what that led to was sort of a free verse poem about someone being, say, in British Columbia, traveling across Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, etc., waiting to see their significant other travel all the way to the Maritimes. And maybe I'll publish that someday. And what that led to were finding 3 or 4 chords on the guitar and writing a sort of folk song about a crow traveling across the provinces, but it being a metaphor for the actual, people. And so there were sort of 3 things that came out of this work. The painting itself, a free verse poem, and then a sort of folk song, which would have never happened had I not seen the structure. Some of the poem itself I wrote on the sides of the canvas, just sort of maybe an influence from some New York art I've seen, Basquiat or whoever, other graffiti artists writing right on the canvas or on the sides. But anyway, that is something to be aware about. I mean, as artists, painters, visual artists, storytellers, one thing can lead to another. The poem and song would have never existed had I not done this piece or seen this property in person, which I have many times north of Toronto. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and found some creative artistic inspiration to do something interesting today. And I will see you on the next video. Ciao.